Joining us now, the one, the only, the polling guru of all time, Scott Rasmussen. You can go to scottrasmussen.com for his latest column. Bookmark that. Sign up for his daily alerts. He's with us now. Scott, great to have you.
Always good to be with you, John.
Start baseball, then go politics and polls, okay? So we got a 60-game season. First, I didn't like it. Now I kind of like it because there's nothing else. Looks like it's going to be real starting July 23rd. But, Scott, like every game is meaningful, right?
Well, you know, it is, but I'm still in the hurting phase. I'm not all that excited about it. In fact, you know, when I was on hold, I heard the moment in history, and it was 63 years ago today that John Lennon and Paul McCartney met. You know, a few years later, I heard them and got my first guitar. So I'm still kind of more on the other side. I'm not really in the mood for baseball just yet. Sorry.
All right, not in the mood for baseball. Well, we'll see what happens. A lot of players not playing, you know, that's their choice. Yep. David Price, Dodgers, got a big contract. He's not playing. Those that are not playing can opt out. They just don't get paid. And I don't begrudge them that decision at all.
No, in fact, individual choice, obviously a very important part of America's cultural tradition. And it's something that feeds into all of our discussions about how we respond to the pandemic. You know, when I went out and did some polling about would you like to go, feel comfortable going to a restaurant, this was a couple months ago, you got a lot of nervous responses. But then when we began to focus on people who regularly went out to eat, and said, would you go to the restaurant, your favorite restaurant? The numbers were a lot higher. Why? Because trust. Because if the restaurant owner told them, you know, that he'd taken whatever they considered appropriate safety protocols, yeah, they trust the guy and go in. And so I think that's something that's been a lot left out of the discussion, the individual choice aspect, and the fact that people are going to make judgments not just on how do I feel, but, you know, what is the environment I'm walking into?
Couple of interesting polling results that you have. I want to start with the first one, Scott Rasmussen. You poll 54% of those out working, those that have jobs now. Either they didn't have it or always kept it essential, but they have it now, believes that the lockdowns did more harm than good.
Well, let me clarify. The people who are out working means people who are actually out working. They're interacting with customers and coworkers. They might be in a restaurant or in a construction site or in any other environment, but they're with other people. And most of them believe the lockdowns have done more harm than good. There's a lot of other people who are working who are not seeing. They're working in isolation. They are sitting behind a computer screen and they're Zooming for their meetings. They are far more pessimistic about the state of the pandemic, far more pessimistic about the health implications, and they are far more likely to say, you're out of your mind. The lockdowns were necessary. And I highlight this distinction because most of the people who are setting our narrative in the political dialogue, the people who are economists, replying about the economy, the people who are in the media telling us what's going on, most of them are in that working in isolation phase, and they do not lift up the voices of people who are actually out working right now. That's one of the reasons they've underestimated the growth in consumer confidence in jobs. They just didn't see it coming.
Without a doubt. Scott Rasmussen with us. Go to scottrasmussen.com. Scott, your latest presidential tracking poll, I got to be honest, I did get a sigh of relief that go up and down, and there's a margin of error, but you got Biden at 47, Trump 39. I mean, 9 beats 12. I mean, a couple of weeks ago when this thing was at 12, I was really despondent. Because your poll is the one that I look at, so it really got me despondent. 9, okay, I can, we're still within striking distance. Double digits plus is not good. So it looks like the president having a little movement in your poll.
Yeah, look, I mean, we can talk about this from a variety of perspectives, and as you and I have discussed, the polls are real. People who don't like them,
they're
may
real.
not want to admit that. But the president is behind, and again, if the election were held today and July 6th, first, we'd be shocked, and secondly, he would lose. But the reality is we have 17 weeks to go until Election Day. And because of that, there's time for change. What is important is going to be the messaging. And right now, there are three top issues: the economy, health care, and civil rights. That last issue has been a problem for the president. If it begins to shift into a discussion of law and order, if there is a growing perception that the protests have moved from being legitimate grievance to inappropriate violence, well, that will help the president. On the economy and everything else, part of it is going to be what really happens. How many jobs really are created. But right now, the Republicans have a terrible messaging position because many of the Republican senators are saying we want no new spending. And I understand the fiscal argument, and I wrote a book on federal budget issues, so I certainly get that. But from a political point of view, it is a loser.
Define that. Why do you say that?
Well, because we asked people, first off, we asked people, would you support no new spending right now? We gave a great build up to it about how much has already been spent and all the problems with the economy are with such spending. And we still only got 46% of voters to say they even kind of like the idea. But when we pitched the idea of which would you choose, no new spending or Nancy Pelosi's plan, by a 55 to 27 margin, 2-1, people said we'd go with Pelosi's plan. There is a belief that something has to be done. And that's why, I mentioned to you the other day the Workplace Recovery Act. Mm-hmm. That's the idea of giving businesses were hurt because of government-ordered shutdowns. Mm-hmm. The Workplace Recovery Act says they should get reimbursed for the losses caused by those government orders. Mm-hmm. And if you give people a choice between that and Pelosi's plan, it is far more popular. Why? Because it focuses on restoring private sector jobs, whereas Pelosi's plan is primarily focused on protecting government jobs. And right now, almost all of the job losses we've seen in the last few months have been in the private sector.
Well, no, very few of them have been in government. Here's one poll you had a week ago that shocked me when I was on vacation when I first went. It came out 39% of Democrats trust 39% trust the Democrats on economy, 38% trust Republicans. I almost fell out of my chair. I expected it to be like 60-30 Republicans.
Yeah, in the beginning of the year, that was clearly the Republicans' big issue. And I said on your show, well, hey, look, as long as the economy holds up, the president will be reelected. But none of us anticipated a pandemic or the economic turmoil we've had. I'm going to be interested to watch that number in the coming weeks and months. So, I think we've now had two very good jobs reports in a row. Still a long way short, still 15 million jobs short of where we were before the pandemic. But if you get a third one, I think that may begin to shift a little bit. But at the moment, look, if people are evenly divided on who they trust in the economy, the president is in trouble.
He's not in trouble. He's dead. I mean, if he doesn't win the economy by 15, he's just not going to win these swing states because that's what he's got.
And look, the first thing is it's the reality of what happened. Both sides have made their bets. The Democrats have bet that the pandemic is going to come back with a second wave and the president will be hurt because he's not offered enough protection. Republicans are betting the economy will come back and Democrats will be hurt with that. But the next challenge, and it's something else, we've seen this before, even if the economy comes back, the Republicans still have to have a message. The president has to have a message about what he is going to offer to do on it. We saw in 2017, talk of tax cuts. They just didn't do a very good job of connecting that to what was happening in the economy. So messaging and a strong economy are essential for the president to come back.
Scott, don't you find right now that the president's message, I'm hoping it changed at Mount Rushmore, but wouldn't you agree with me that right now the message coming out of the White House, the Republicans, the whole thing has been just a garbled fiasco?
Sure. I would say that as we headed into the 4th of July weekend, the Democrats had a very clear message, and it wasn't just a message on the issues of the day. They have very clearly established that they are the party of government. They believe that government should have more power in America, should set more rules, and that people should be less focused on individual freedom and rights and self-governance. The Republicans, in opposition to the party of government, haven't really figured out what it is they want to be, at least from a messaging and theme point of view. And when I say that, I include not just the president and his campaign, but the Republican leadership in Congress as well.
Because fear, right? So they're afraid to get pigeonholed. They're afraid of this, afraid of that. And it's the same old story. The Democrats are bold. They're out there saying what they want to be. You know, some of the things they're saying are like bizarre, but they have the boldness to say it. You got one guy running for Congress in New York that's basically saying on Twitter that if you know a Trump supporter, report them on Twitter, harass them. Right. I mean, are you kidding me? Like, I mean, are you the guy's a president of the United States, and because I'm a Trump supporter, I'm going to get harassed on Twitter in my subdivision? Like, what is wrong with you? But they're bold in saying that, and the Republicans just cower. Like, oh my God.
Well, and you just hit on something. You know, when I said earlier, if the issues begin to shift a little bit from a focus on civil rights and some of the racial inequalities and injustice, if you begin to focus to a different topic, to more of a law and order theme, that's going to be very good for the president. And some data that we're releasing it sometime today. I'm not sure if it's out just yet, but we found that people who strongly disapprove of the president, you know, the people that Joe Biden is really counting on to show up and vote and to be his base because Joe Biden is not named Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. Of that group, most of them, a majority of them, oppose taking down statues of Jefferson, Washington, Lincoln, and in fact, 17% of all voters, 1 out of 6 voters nationwide, fall into that category. They really don't like Donald Trump, but they really don't like taking down those statues. And that's a group that if the protests continue as they're going and the focus begins to shift more on these calls for removing statues of George Washington, well, that's going to help the president because these people will be conflicted. They're not quite sure. They won't like either side.
Well, we're going to see how that plays out, but I do agree with you 100%. The Republicans right now have no coherent or consistent message, nor that they have a manifesto for what a second term will bring. And the Democrats have one. They want social justice. They want criminal justice reform. They want no bail. They want defund the police. I mean, you might not agree with them, but they have a message, right? They want social workers instead of cops. I mean, it goes on and on and on and on. They want to be able to control social media. They want Trump supporters banned for hate. They want political correctness. They want to change your speech. They want to change what goes on in colleges. They don't like private schools. They don't want school choice. I mean, they got a litany of things out there. I still don't know. What are you going to do in a second term? Don't you agree with me, Scott? Until he does that, you're not going to gain.
Well, first, you can never beat something with nothing. You can't beat a candidate unless you have another candidate. You can't beat messaging unless you have a message of your own. And I think the other part, and you just went through a litany of issues, but again, they're all very consistent. There is a coherent theme that is reflective of a party of government. Mm-hmm. And there is no opposing theme. Even people who are uncomfortable with a lot of what the Democrats say aren't quite sure what the Republican alternative will be. I'll give you a great example of the distinction. 4 years ago, there were a lot of evangelical Christians who were very skeptical about President Trump because of his lifestyle, because of his past, because they weren't sure what they were getting. When he promised to appoint justices to the Supreme Court, it's not from a certain list. It's not that everybody believed he would actually do that. Many did. Many had their doubts. But they at least thought there was a better chance that he would nominate a Supreme Court justice than his opponent, Hillary Clinton. They were 100% sure Hillary Clinton would nominate somebody they didn't agree with. So the president had a message. He had a positive approach to it. And that won him a tremendous amount of support from evangelical Christians and is one of the reasons that he is in the White House today.
And now, in a second term, you would think that would be, he would continue with that message because Ruth Bader Ginsburg says she's not going to continue to 2024. There's a replacement there. Yeah. She says she's going to retire. but yet because of some of the decisions have gone the other way, that becomes tougher for him. But he's not even articulating that. That's my point. That's why I think the White House, the whole messaging is just a garbled mess. I'm hoping he changed it, because I thought what he did on Friday night is what I thought he did was, I'm the candidate for civilization and order. Biden is the candidate for anarchy and chaos. I think that's what he attempted to do, and I think he was successful at it. We'll have to see what happens going forward.
Yeah, I agree with that, but it's also important to remember that on the Friday night of 4th of July weekend, not a lot of people saw it, so it is going to be, what's going to have to happen is a tremendous effort, a little more disciplined messaging coming out of the White House focused on what they're going to do in a second term, how they're going to handle the reopening of the economy and other things. It needs to have some consistency, and it needs to be something other than, well, we're going to do what Nancy Pelosi has suggested, but spend less on it. They do need a positive
Spend
alternative.
less. I mean, it's exactly it. The best analysis I've gotten so far, and I'm gonna go with it because it's spot on. Scott, as always, Scott Rasmussen. Go to scottrasmussen.com. Is Scott said the Democrats have clearly defined themselves now going forward as the party of bigger government and less individual freedom. That government has to do certain things in order to change and make your life better than it is now. They have clearly gone with that message. And I don't think it's a winning message in the long term, but it's certainly, they're consistent with it and they're bold with it. And right now it is winning. Right?
It's winning because there's nothing else out there.
Thank you.
There is a void.
In the land of the blind, Scott, the one-eyed man is king. Thank you for being with us. Go to scottrasmussen.com. It's the first thing I look forward to in my inbox. What does Scott say today? scottrasmussen.com. Thank you, Scott. Always an honor to have you on, sir. John Fredericks Radio Network.